Yeah, we back. We back. Now, today's going to be a special video. Listen, man, listen. Today, we're going to be talking about the French economy, right? The French government has came out and admitted that the French economy is on the verge of collapse, right? Now, this comes on the heels of the video that I dropped the other day entitled, France Admits Bankruptcy on African Uranium Operations. Right? If you remember, we were speaking about the French uranium company, the French multinational Orano, that has came out. Take a look up on the screen. France's Orano says that its Niger uranium mine is on the verge of bankruptcy. Right? Now we come out with new headlines. Take a look up on the screen. France's belt tightening plan to avoid being crushed by mounting debt. Right? A crash is coming and France is not doing enough to stop it, according to a top economist. The French Prime Minister unveils a radical plan to tackle the deadly danger of national debt. France proposes cutting 2 public holidays to avert the budget crisis. Drastic measures are necessary before we are crushed by the debt, according to the country's Prime Minister. Right? Now, today's going to be a special video. I need my Burkina Faso to stand up. I need my Beninese to stand up. I need my Cameroonians to stand up. I need my Chadians to stand up. I need my Gabonese to stand up. I need my Guadeloupeans to stand up. I need my Ghanaians to stand up. I need my Ivorians to stand up. I need my Malians, my Martinicans, right? My Nigerians. I need even the Senegalese, the Togolese. Listen, all the Francophone blacks, the Haitians. Listen. This is a special video for us because those of us whose ancestors were tortured under various French regimes, right? Those of us who our ancestors built the country of France with their blood and their sweat and their torture and their misery, right? It feels good to see France be destroyed. You know, I'm sorry to tell you, right? Yes, our ancestors built that country. That's a fact, but I take no pride in that. Every time I see the French take a loss, I celebrate. Every time I see the French economy going through turbulent times, I celebrate. Every time I see the French government losing influence in Africa, I celebrate. And I know for a fact the forefathers are celebrating also. Now, let's get into the topic of today, man. Take a look up on the screen. France's prime minister warned on Tuesday that the country faces a Greek-scale financial crisis if it does not act decisively to rein in its ballooning debt and deficit. He proposed a series of drastic measures to mend the nation's budget, including scrapping 2 national holidays. In a sobering speech to the lawmakers and the members of President Emmanuel Macron's cabinet, Prime Minister Francois Bayrou said France's debt had risen higher than that of almost every other country in Europe, reaching 114% of GDP. Bringing it down in the coming years will require freezing non-military spending and encouraging the French to work more, right? So the French citizens, in order to, patch up the nation's economy, the French citizens are going to have to go back to work, right? So I don't know what the French been doing. Apparently the French ain't really been working like that. I don't know what's going on, right? So the prime minister says that our citizens are going to have to go back to work. They're going to have to take their ass to work, right? They're going to have to go to work, right? No more living off the backs of others and living off the resources of others and living fat off the hog, right? Living lavish up in Paris, eating baguettes all day, right? While innocent children in Africa got to suffer so you can live lavish. No, you're going to have to go to work. That's what Prime Minister, His Excellency, Prime Minister Francois Bayrou told Emmanuel Macron's government, yesterday or today or whenever. He said, listen, our citizens are going to have to go back to work. No more free food, no more free lunch, no more free rides. It's time to go back to work. Take your ass back to work. And that really ties into what I said in my video the other day. It's not the Western nations doing charity for African nations. It's actually African nations doing charity for the Western world. It's actually African nations doing charity for France. It's actually African nations doing charity for the United States so the French citizens, so the American citizens can live lavish and live comfortable, right? But see, the propaganda they feed to us is these Western nations are the generous benefactors doing charity for the downtrodden Africans, when in reality, it's the other way around. It's actually the African nations doing charity for the Western world, and it's been that way for a very long time, but it won't be that way for a very long time going forward. Let's continue. Mr. Bayrou's spending cuts would include not replacing 1 out of 3 civil servants when they retired, and eliminating unproductive state agencies. He would also scale back France's subsidies for prescription medicine, saying the French consume twice as many antibiotics as the Germans. You see, listen, the French just been living fat, right? Apparently they ain't even been working that much, the French government, subsidizing a whole bunch of garbage, right? But see, when you've been looting and pillaging for so long and you think that it's going to last forever and you built your entire economic model off looting and pillaging, when the well begins to run dry, now you got to cut back. Now you got to scale back. Now you got to downsize, right? Now you got to downsize. See, at one time you were living in a mansion, right? You were driving a Mercedes, you had a Phantom, you had a Ferrari, but now you got to downsize because the money not coming in like it once was, right? So now you got to sell off that Ferrari, right? You got to downsize from the mansion and you got to get an apartment. You might have to rent a room for a little bit on Airbnb while you get your money right? You got to downsize. You got to sell off your belongings. You got to sell off the jewelry, right? Sell the jewelry. You got to sell off the paintings. You got to sell off the couches and the furniture. You got to sell it off, man. Sell it off. Sell it all off. You got to sell it off, man. Everything must go, right? Now let's continue. The measure most likely to rankle the French was a proposal to scrap 2 national holidays, Easter Monday and May 8th, which commemorates the end of the Second World War in Europe and is often used as a bridge by the French to take a 4-day weekend in the middle of spring. All right, we taking 4-day weekends. You see, things were so beautiful when the money was coming in, right? We taking 4-day weekends. We subsidizing everything for our citizens. We got a lovely unemployment fund. Oh man, we got so much just excess money laying around from the centuries of loot and pillage that we could just finance a whole bunch of garbage, right? Just live lavish, right? 4-day weekends and everything. Now we got no more 4-day weekends, right? Now you got to go to work. It's crazy, man. See, it's crazy. See, I told y'all this would happen. You see, Neferkari Dessalines, I told y'all years ago what would happen if African nations cut off the resources and cut off access to certain nations. You will see the collapse occur in real time, right? You'll see. I told y'all this would happen. Listen, y'all think these guys are some generous benefactors, when in reality, these guys are some well-dressed and well-spoken freeloaders, right? A bunch of moochers living off the backs of others, right? And because a lot of y'all are too stupid to see through the propaganda, you guys actually respect and look up to these people, when in reality, there's a bunch of freeloaders living free off other people. And now, as you can see, once they're no longer able to live free off other people, look how much they got to cut back and downsize so fast, right? In just a few years, the French economy is just collapsing in real time, tumbling. Now you got French government officials sounding the alarm and say, listen, we are about to be destroyed. Let's continue. The entire country is going back to work on a day that it has not worked for a very long time, adding that the holiday cuts would bring several billion euros to French coffers because of higher production. You see, you got to go back to work because the government needs to generate revenue for the state coffers. You got to go back to work, right? No more 4-day weekends, no more just taking extra holidays off for no reason, subsidized by the government. Nope. Go back to work. You see, myself, I just came from work. I just knocked out 10 hours, 11 hours. You see, you gotta get like me. You gotta go back to work. 12 hours standing on your feet. No more free lunch. No more living off the backs of other people. No, you gotta go back to work like everybody else, right? It's been way too long. Y'all have grown accustomed to not working ever since the days of the French colonies, right? The French colonists would wake up first thing in the morning. The first thing he would do was either smoke some tobacco or get drunk, start drinking. He don't even drink water. First thing in the morning, he drinking some hard liquor, right? So the French colonists laying around, not working, not lifting a finger, never getting in the field, right? Just going around, getting drunk, having sex. That's it, right? Getting rich, never working. So because you built your entire empire off not working, it's kind of a culture shock to you now that, yeah, you're going to have to go back to work. Even on certain holidays where you haven't worked in decades, it's time to go back to work. It's time to go back to work. You see, when it came to our ancestors who built your country, right, you worked them to death. You worked them so hard that their life expectancy didn't even go past a few years, right? They really worked. You worked them to death just so you didn't have to work. But now you have to go back to work. Now let's continue. In recent years, ruckus demonstrations have rocked France over an increase in the retirement age. You see, we got to raise the retirement age. We got to raise the retirement age, and now the French citizens taken to the streets because they're so accustomed to being subsidized by their government. They're so accustomed to their government holding their hand through everything like a bunch of freeloaders. So now every time the French government cuts back on the subsidies, you take to the streets like a bunch of barbarians. Now let's continue. An increase in the retirement age, a move taken by President Macron to curb government spending, which at 57% of gross domestic product is among the highest in Europe. One of Mr. Bayrou's proposals would be to cap pension payments, an issue to likely rekindle the flames. So see, we got to cut back on the pensions. We got to send you back to work, right? We have to take back some of the subsidies. We got to take back some of the unemployment benefits. We got to take back the luxuries of looting and pillage. We got to take back the luxuries of colonial pillage. Let's continue. France, a cornerstone economy in Europe, has become a weak link. France, a cornerstone economy in Europe, I repeat, has become the weak link, as its deteriorating financial situation has generated concern among investors and credit rating agencies. You see, now the foreign investors are looking at France as a liability, right? You used to be a cornerstone economy, a world power, right? Now you are the weak link of Europe, right? The weak link of Europe. And isn't it so funny how the French economy began to tumble at the very same time as its influence in Africa began to wane? Oh my God. Oh my God. Now you went from being one of the flagship nations in Europe. Now the foreign investors look at you as the weak link. Man, get ready, because your future is going to look a lot like Spain and Portugal. You see, at one time, Spain and Portugal, world powers, naval powers, colonial powers, right? But now Spain and Portugal, a bunch of washed up has-beens. Their days of glory are behind them. Nobody looks at them as these world powers as they once were before, right? And guess what? Your future, it looks a lot like Spain and Portugal. A washed up has-been. Your glory days are behind you. You're going to be like, oh, back in my day, back in the glory days, that's going to be you, reminiscing on the glory days. Now, let's continue. This would require getting more people into work, Mr. Bayrou said, in part by tightening up France's generous unemployment system. There are not enough of us working, he said. Listen, there are not enough of you working. And like I said, it's always been that way. It always hasn't been enough of you working, because your entire economic model from the very beginning was based off not working. It was based off colonial pillage. It was based off catching a free ride off the back of somebody else. And like I mentioned before, when your entire future is hedged on riding somebody else's back, what are you going to do when they eventually stand up? Because when they stand up, you're going to fall over. And we can smell the aroma of desperation, because look at this headline that just came out. France signals a willingness to discuss reparations for colonial massacres in Niger, right? Now, Niger cut off the uranium access. French companies going bankrupt. Now, all of a sudden, they want to come to the table and talk about reparations, right? But just a couple years ago, they didn't want to come to the table and have a conversation. You see, back in 2023, it was all about the restoration of democracy, military invasion. We got to spill blood. We got to drop bombs. We got to invade the country. Now, all of a sudden, we want to talk reparations. We want to have a dialogue. We want to sit at the table, right? Listen, now you want to be friendly and cordial, right? Because your back is against the wall, right? Because the money is running dry, right? Because the money running low. Now, before we get out of here, I want to get into, I'm going to give English translation of a speech that was given by I think the French Prime Minister, His Excellency Francois Bayrou, the gentleman who actually sounded the alarm and let it be known that the French economy is an emergency, right? It's an emergency, right? Listen, he's the one that let it be known. Listen, we got to make some changes or else we're going to be dead. I'm going to run the clip. I'll be right back.
Every second that passes, France's debt increases by 5,000 euros. 5,000 euros of additional debt per second. That's where we are. And that is why I believe that, as we have been saying since the government was established, we now have the duty to take responsibility. I believe this is the last stop before the cliff and being crushed by debt. We must call it by its name. It is a mortal danger for a country. There you have it. If we see truth as the weapon of the citizens, this is what must be shared with the French people.
All right, we back. There you have it, folks. His Excellency Prime Minister Francois Bayrou letting it be known that the French government is in mortal danger and they're about to fall off the cliff. Now, listen, this did not happen overnight. This has been a gradual descent, right? Starting back, I believe, during COVID, that's when you began to hear, certain, talks and rumblings of the French economy, showing cracks and weaknesses, right? Because, like I said before, the French government, due to the fact that they've been, living fat off colonial pillage, give their citizens a bunch of free garbage, right? So they've been spending so much money, and at the same time, they were losing influence internationally and geopolitically around the exact same time. So now you reach a point where you're trying to confront so much government spending with a lot of loss in revenue and influence at the same time. That's why they're now being forced to downsize, and Francois Bayrou is now ringing the alarm. And the fact of the matter is, the business model they established is simply not sustainable for the long term. It's not sustainable for the long term. Just like the French colony of Saint-Domingue, which accounted for 40 or 50% of, France's international trade, right? that system is not sustainable, right? You built a system, the wealthiest colony in the world at that time, but meanwhile, you had your workforce had a lifespan of like 2 years, 3 years, right? The women on the colony were not reproducing because they were living under so much stress that their reproductive system shut down. That's why you had to keep importing new Africans, because the women were not reproducing because they were under such stress that they became basically infertile, right? You had young women who could not even reproduce because the conditions they were living in made their bodies shut down. So in order to replenish the workforce, you had to constantly bring in more Africans from the continent. And those same Africans also died in a couple years. So you had to bring in more Africans, right? Just so you didn't have to work, right? But guess what? That business model was not sustainable. And that's why eventually the citizens rose up, and then we saw what happened to your people. Your people got chopped up and destroyed, right? Because the business model is not sustainable. And now, fast forward to 2025, just like back in 1791, you are now being confronted with the fact that your economic model is not sustainable. And like I said, we started seeing the cracks around COVID when the world shut down, right? And you're a country that heavily relies on tourism, especially, right? So that also took a major hit. And right after that, 2021, that was when Mali fell. The government in Mali fell, right? You got kicked out of Mali, 2021. That was when it began. That was the beginning of the end, right? 2022, Burkina Faso. 2023, Niger lost their uranium. Oh man, that right there, that was the big blow. Some might say that was the knockout punch. You see, it first began with the rumblings of anti-French sentiment. You see, the anti-French sentiment was bubbling long before the governments fell. You see, the governments fell as a result of the anti-French sentiment. But you see, the anti-French sentiment in Africa was already bubbling before the government in Mali fell. You see, the anti-French sentiment, that was like the early rounds, right? You see, but when Mali fell, that was like the first clean punch. Boom! We punch you straight in your face, right? The black man punched you straight in your jibs. Boom! Right? Then Burkina Faso, the double up combo. Boom, boom! Right? And then Niger, the knockout blow, bang! And now you on the floor, you on your knees begging for mercy. You begging the black man for mercy. You begging the black man for clemency. Now you talking about reparations. Please, brother, please. And I really don't think people really grasp the geopolitical consequences of France losing access to the uranium, right? I mean, yes, we know the company's going bankrupt, but man, y'all really don't understand. Like, that's literally probably one of the most significant political events of this generation. And keep in mind, the other Western nations are watching, right? They're watching, right? They're looking at France get humiliated, and they don't want to be next. They don't want to be next on the chopping block, losing my mining concessions, losing my military agreements. My company's going bankrupt. My national debt is soaring. I got to cut back benefits and subsidies. I got to send my citizens back to work on holidays. Listen, the other Western nations, like the United States especially, right? That's why you think the United States is trying to cozy up to Africa right now. They're trying to get friendly with Africa, right? Africa is like that beautiful woman, right? They don't want to get slapped, right? So no. That's why you see a lot of people taking a friendly disposition towards the continent, because they know the geopolitical and economic consequences that occur when you lose influence and you lose friendships on the continent, right? So, for the rest of y'all that want to attack the continent, nobody pays attention to you. Anybody else trying to, like I said, trying to talk down on the continent, nobody pays attention to you. You're an irrelevant cockroach, right? You're an irrelevant cockroach, right? In real life, nobody checking for you. You see this real life. You see the Frenchman, he going broke. The Frenchman on his knees, right? So, like I said, man, this is a special video for me. Somebody myself, like I said, I don't got no love, no sympathy, no mercy for my enemies. No mercy, right? I don't take no pride in the fact that my ancestors built up your country. In fact, I hate the fact that my ancestors were used as the sacrificial lambs to build up your country. And every time your country goes through hardships, I celebrate. Every time your country goes through turbulent times, I celebrate, right? I celebrate. I'm about to have a drink right after this because I'm really genuinely happy to see you struggling and see your demise. And I was going to make a video on the Patreon tonight about that, the reparations thing. But then I seen this. I seen the prime minister basically going on television saying that we are broke. We are going broke, right? We are spending way too much and we are not generating enough. So now the citizens, you got to go back to work. We got to cut some of the benefits and spending and subsidies. We got to tighten our belts. You know what I mean? We got to get to it. We got to get to it. We've been living high off the hog for way too long. And now, things are really starting to catch up with us. So yeah, it is what it is. Anyways, man, it's your boy Neferkari Salim back in the building. Yes, indeed. 21 Cannons, the first single off the next album. Check it out. Video, pin comment at the top. Subscribe to the Patreon, NTD 1814. And I'm gone. Peace. Walk in the room and I stop all that talking. Stay on alert and I'm moving with caution. Feeling like baby, I'm up in New Orleans. Feeling like Stunner, feeling like Wheezy. Look at my nigga, my wrist is Fiji. Trying to get cash, I don't wanna be famous. Look at my nigga, my wrist contagious. Ain't no stopping when I get started. Ain't no stopping, gotta go harder. Drop that top, whip go brainless. Chasing that check, I ain't trying to be famous. Whipping that Benz, feeling like spaceships. Everything official, ain't no fake shit. Doors unlocked, community gated. Look at this ice, bet they gon' hate it. Look at my life, enemy vanquished. Then it's on sight, gun in your faces. Look at that love, turn to hatred. Kill my ops like a Haitian. Ain't no love, ain't no honor, ain't no trust, ain't no conscience. I ain't perfect, but I'm honest. Enemy lurking, enemy watching, enemy stalking, taking photos 24/7. Straight surveillance, hit a new spot, change locations. Shorty got wet off my cadence. Just see ice, but I got papers. Ladies love me, and I got flavors. Ain't no love in these streets. Nèg yo jaloux, yo méchant. Got them chains off my feet, by the sword and by the gun. They throw flowers at my feet, and they say that I'm the one, and they say that I'm the target. When they see me, they pay homage. Shorty talking about divesting, she with Malibu most wanted. When I go and get that check, I put it up and make it stack. Breaking that bank, whipping that Benzo. When I pull off, it go fast. Need a Fortune 5 accountant just to count up all this cash. Got these Sambos trying to sue me just to make me walk it back. Walk in the room and I stop all that talking. Stay on alert and I'm moving with caution. Feeling like baby, I'm up in New Orleans. Feeling like Stunner, feeling like Wheezy. Look at my nigga, my wrist is Fiji. Trying to get cash, I don't wanna be famous. Look at my nigga, my wrist contagious. Ain't no stopping when I get started. Ain't no stopping, gotta go harder. Drop that top, whip go brainless. Chasing that check, I ain't trying to be famous. Whipping that Benz, feeling like spaceships. Everything official, ain't no fake shit. Doors unlocked, community gated. Look at this ice, bet they gon' hate it. Look at my life, enemy vanquished. And it's on sight, gun in your faces. Look at that love, turn to hatred. Kill my ops like a Haitian. Ain't no love, ain't no honor, ain't no trust, ain't no conscience. I ain't perfect, but I'm honest. Enemy lurking, enemy watching, enemy stalking, taking photos 24/7. Straight surveillance, hit a new spot, change location. Shorty got wet off my cadence. Just see ice, but I got papers. Ladies love me, and I got flavors. Ain't no love in these streets. Nèg yo jaloux, yo méchant.